and the wall right in the middle, and right under it you have a user, and the user in their case is a consultant. Okay, and let's say the consultant is consulting for Bank A, whole bunch of corporate data. That means the user, the consultant is privy to some insider information within Bank A because of the nature of the work. And if Bank B were to contact this consultant and say, hey, look, I hear that you're doing a great job on Bank A. We have similar requirements and similar needs. Would you come and work for us as well? And if the contractor is abide by the Chinese wall model, the answer will be no. Okay, because you're in the same industry, and I cannot work for another company in the same industry. Okay, and I know some consulting companies abide by this rule, right? So they say, I'll pick all the industries, and I only have one customer from each industry, right? So that would be following the Chinese wall model. The research paper also continues to say that if Bank B is not a Bank B, but let's say it's an automotive company B, then it'll be okay because it's a different industry. Okay, so that is the controlling of the conflict of interest. Pretty straightforward, right? All right. So the next model is there's no more model. I'm sure there's others. I'm sure in the book somewhere, but that's all I have for you as a highlight. And the applied cryptography. So yes, we've already done cryptography. Yes. So it's just a very there's a couple things to add, but I'm just going to quickly go through the slide. Okay. So just to kind of refresh your memory, because encryption is pretty important, or cryptography is pretty important in the exam as well. Oh, okay. So here we go. So there isn't much difference from the old exam to the new exam when it comes to the cryptography. They just added some stuff. So I'm using my previous one plus the new things. So here is the old version, but still relevant. So cryptographic concepts. So okay, so I'm going to quickly go through them. If you have any questions, just stop me. Okay. So cryptology, right? Cryptography, cryptanalysis. You should know the definition of all these. Cipher, right? Algorithm. Plain text, right? And then you have the encryption. Then you have the cipher text. You have decryption, encryption, ciphertext. These are all the terms you need. Here, what we don't have are the keys, but we'll talk about the key concepts. CI but not A. So cryptography provides confidentiality, integrity, but not availability. It does provide authentication. So here's a question: how does cryptography provide authentication? How does it do that? Authentication. So, okay, let's think about it, Christopher. So, authentication means, hey, you asserting that you're somebody, so show me the evidence that you are somebody, right? So, how does a signature provide an evidence that this is the person who they say they are? Okay, yeah, so the main thing that I was looking for is the concept that we talked about, authentication, authenticity of source. That will serve as the authentication because somebody's proving that you are who you say you are. So I was asking that question because I was looking for certs, right? With a cert, you have third-party, vetting of who you are. Hey, no problem. You're back or you're earlier. Oh, you're a minute late, Lisa. Just a minute. Yeah. So do you see, Christopher, how signature is method for what? What does a signature do? Signature by itself without the cert. What does it prove? Right. That's good. All right. Yeah. So we were talking about non-repudiation, right? Yeah, exactly. So you can prove that that is the person who actually signed it, so it's non-repudiation. But that doesn't really, by itself, without the cert, it's not going to prove that A is who they say they are. It just proves that A is A. That's all. Yeah. So very good. And let's see, Terry, for the public-private keys, such as in SSH. Authentication, yeah, that's true because let me see, the private. Okay, yeah, you're right, Terry. But in the SSH, the public and private keys, it doesn't necessarily need a cert, right? Yeah, so I would imagine, or does it? I've done SSH without a cert before. Yeah, exactly. Placed on the server, public key placed on the server, private key kept by the person. When you try to log in, they'll send you something encrypted in the private key, public key, and then you're able to decrypt it in the private key, and then you send it back with a private key and make sure that it's the same one. Then they prove that yeah, you did indeed get it, and you were able to decrypt it. So nowhere in there is there a certificate, right? So you see how that could be a little bit weaker. That says, look, well, I guess it could be for authentication because you have to present. You have to say that I have the private key. I have to think about that a little bit, Terry. Okay, but I know it's used for authentication. Yes, I know that. But let me think about that. Maybe that could be a weakness in SSH. Well, let's see. Very good. Makes me think. That's good. Proof of identity claim, authentication. So it's proof that says I am who I say I am. Okay. Now repudiation. So we do the signatures. Now key concepts here. Substitution cipher. It's just one of those things that may come up. Substitution cipher is very, very old. A version of it is called the Caesar cipher. That's why I have that little Caesar cipher thing in there. Okay. So the one that we know and love the most is the ROT13. We divide the alphabet into two, and then we put them one on top of another, and then we replace one with another. So we replaced A with an N, B with an O, C with a P. Right. So you see the colors, the blue, orange, green, red. You see them how they got that transformation. Right. So hello becomes Urub. Right. So that would be a substitution cipher. There's something called the permutation cipher. So the permutation cipher, also known as the transposition. Okay, transposition. So you are moving things around in a certain manner. You have the 1 and 2 flipped, and you have like 3 and 4 moving, and 5 come into place, 6 stays in place. So that would be the algorithm in how you transpose things. And on top of that, right, people use this thing right here. They'll use a substitution cipher in combination with this thing right here, which is permutation cipher. Okay, so it is usually combined with a substitution cipher. Okay. All right. Cryptographic strings. They are called. It should be difficult to convert a cipher text back into the plain text without the key. Okay. It's not saying it's impossible, but it's supposed to be very, very difficult. Work factor is how long does it take to break a crypto system? That is to decrypt the cipher text without the key. Okay? And we will see an example of this in the latest CVE that's been reported on the OpenSSL. That is here. So remember, that's work factor. And this changes, right? Because it depends on the availability of the computational power, okay? How fast it is, right? That has a tendency to speed up this whole process a lot. Mono and polyalphabetic ciphers. So monoalphabetic cipher uses one fixed alphabet substitution. So that is the initial substitution cipher, ROT13, okay, ROT13. That's an example of a monoalphabetic cipher. Polyalphabetic cipher, also known as a Vigenère cipher, uses multiple alphabet substitution. So you do it once and then you do it a second time, right? So that's Vigenère cipher. And I have a link to Vigenère cipher. I hope it's not broken. Come on, Vigenère cipher. No, heck, whatever that is. Okay, so Vigenère cipher. So it's multiple, right? Multiple substitutions. So they all kind of look the same, don't they? So there it is. You have one alphabet, keyword letters. You have two second alphabets, and you do this multiple times. So there you go. Okay, something like that. They're not going to ask you for that. They just want to know if you know what a visionary cipher is. Okay, so it's the multiple substitution ciphers using multiple alphabet substitutions. Okay, XOR. This is going to be very important for you to know XOR. And little did I know, when I was in college, I hated electrical engineering, and this is like an allergy reaction to me whenever I see these, gates, like XOR gates, AND gates, NAND gates, right? All those things. I'm not sure if you had to do them, but I didn't know that the XOR was going to be this important. So XOR is often used in the cryptographic algorithms, and you'll see why. And so XOR is, you have a little plus sign with a circle around it. Okay, so A XOR B is A XOR B. If you see the table there, if there are two of the same things, you get zeros, right? So if it's 0 and 0, you get 0. 1 and 1, you get 0, right? And if it's 0 and 1 or 1 and 0, you get a 1. That's basically XOR. Okay, and XOR is used all over the place, so you'll see pretty soon, and why that's important to you. Okay, all right, so any questions on this? All right, because next we're going to go into the symmetric encryption, which we know to be using same key for both encryption and decryption, right? That was the symmetric. Okay, and also the use one key to encrypt and decrypt, right? So two categories of cipher: stream cipher and block cipher. So I think I've mentioned this, but block cipher, yeah, I did mention it. So block cipher is when you take the whole text that has to be encrypted, break it down into little even number of blocks. Okay, so they all have to be the same size usually. Okay, so the very last block usually doesn't, is just right size, so you have to pad to make it. You have to put padding to make it the right size of the block, and then you encrypt the blocks. Streaming cipher is the data is keep on streaming in, right? So you don't actually know where it ends, so you can't block them off, because if you don't know the end, you don't know when it's going to end. If you don't know when it's going to end, then you're not going to be able to put, you don't know how many pads to put in, right? The padding. But streaming cipher then, in another way, is a block cipher with the block size of 1 byte. Okay, so that could be interpreted as that. Anyhow, so there is the 5 modes of block cipher. Okay, and I'm going to give, for example, block cipher DES, data encryption standard, or data encryption algorithm, DEA, is a type of symmetric encryption. Okay, so what you need to know for the exam is you do need to know 5 modes of block cipher. So let me show you an example. And in fact, in your book, there's a table in there that has all the 5 modes. Okay, so I'm going to show you what that looks like. I'm going to Wikipedia because they have the best graphics for this whole thing. Okay. Okay, we'll talk about all these things, the padding and stuff. We'll talk about all that. Okay, so the first one you need to know is something called the Electronic Code Book, ECB. Okay, and by far ECB is the easiest one to break. Is the easiest one to break. So remember now, something like DES, right, is a block cipher. Is a symmetric encryption algorithm, which is a block cipher. That means block algorithm. Okay, and what they're saying here is that you can use encryption in 5 ways. So DES could be CBC, DES could be ECB, it could be CBC, it could be I think it's FCB, or so there are others, all 5 modes. So you have to know when you say DES or when you say AES, which mode are you using? Right? AES in CBC mode or AES in ECB mode, etc. Okay. So anyway, ECB, take a look at it. You have the plain text. So you have 3 plain text side by side. Put them all together, and that is the plain text that you're trying to encrypt. Okay. And then you have, so you break it into even size blocks. Okay. And most likely the last block where you have on the right hand most probably isn't an exact size, so there'll be some padding to it. And then you have the block cipher encryption right in the middle, and you stick the key in there that's a variable, right, that you put into the algorithm, and then pop out ciphertext and you repeat the whole thing. Okay, so this is the electronic code book. Right, this probably is the easiest one to break because the key, they're all the same. Key is all the same. Okay, so we'll see if it is easy indeed for it to break or not. But in the book, that's what it says. Okay. And if you were to look at this page, you'll see something that looks exactly like it, except the opposite. Ciphertext goes in and plaintext pops out. So this is the decryption algorithm. The keys are the same way. They all use the same keys. Okay, so this would be how you would decrypt it. Okay, so that is the electronic code book. There is something called the cipher block chaining. Okay, recently it has gained some notoriety on these from the attackers because they say, look, I can break this thing. So cipher block chaining works this way. Look at this. All right. There's a new information in there called the initialization vector, right? IV. Initialization vector is a second variable that you put into the algorithm. Okay, that's it. So they're usually fixed size value, and the IV needs to change every time. IV cannot be like a key that repeats itself. Okay, the reason why WEP was broken because the IV repeated. That was death. Okay, but anyway, you have the IV, and look what's happening with the plain text. It's a little plus sign with a circle in it. Yeah, that's XOR. Okay, so in a CBC you are XORing IV with plain text. Then taking that product, you're sticking it into the block cipher encryption with a key. Okay, and then pop out a ciphertext on the other side. And here's the important part about CBC. The next IV is the ciphertext. Okay, of the first block. Take that, and that's going to be the IV for the second block. You XOR it with a plain text, and then you get the ciphertext, and continue on with it. Okay. Now, doesn't it kind of look a little harder than the electronic codebook ECB? First of all, because you have two variables now. It's not just a key that the person has to figure out. It's the IV. Right? If you don't know the initialization vector, you're not going to be able to decrypt the plaintext on the first side because you know that because if you look at the decryption algorithm, here it is. Look at it. You have the ciphertext, right? 3 blocks of ciphertext, and you have to decrypt them each. The very first ciphertext, you have to decrypt it. You have to stick it into the cipher, so it's the opposite, right? You have to stick it into the cipher with the key, and then you get an intermediate value out of that, right? So you don't see it in there, but there's something that comes out of the cipher. And then whatever that comes out of the cipher, which is a decrypted version of the ciphertext, you have to XOR it with the IV. And then, after the XORing it, you'll get the plain text. Okay? And then, remember how the following, the IV was the ciphertext, right? If you recall, right? So the second IV is a ciphertext from the first operation, and then the next one and next one, it just changed like that. So what that means then is that the ciphertext is now the IV to the intermediate value that comes out from this second operation, right? So you have the ciphertext, something comes out on the other side. So right there where I have my mouse, okay, right there, there's an intermediate value, right? And you XOR that with the ciphertext, and then you get the plain text, and on and on and on. Do you see any problems with this? I will show you how this was broken. There's actually something in here that you see right there. There's a problem with the CBC that makes it relatively easier to break this. Any ideas? Remember I told you that the IVs are supposed to be hard to guess? Right? If it's easy to guess, why put it in there, right? Yeah, Terry. That's right. The second ciphertext block. Yeah, what's the problem with that, Terry? And you're right. What is the problem with that? That's right. So if you see this on the second block, notice the second block? So the attacker is going to have the ciphertext. So attacker is going to have this first block of ciphertext, second block of ciphertext, third block of ciphertext, on and on and on. For the first block, chances are you're not going to know what the IV is. But guess what? For the second block, you know what the IV is. It's right there. Your IV. See? And right there. That's your IV. You have all these values. Here's the key, by the way, Terry, for breaking this thing. So we'll talk about that afterwards. But yeah, so it's pretty interesting this way. Then keeping that in mind. Okay, keeping that in mind. And you wonder, like, why would you do something like this, right? Make it easy. But they do. Okay. And so here's another question. Okay. And let's see, Terry, of course, you're welcome to answer, and I want others too to kind of take a look at this, right? Remember what XORs do, right? Remember what XORs did, right? So if they're the two of the same thing, they give you a 0. If they're the different thing, they give you a 1, right? Okay. So let's say that you don't get to see the plain text because you don't have access to it, but you actually have access to the cipher, right? So you have access to the ciphertext. You have access to the cipher. You don't know exactly what the key is. Okay? Somebody is able to tell you, okay, if you got the plain text right or wrong. If someone were to tell you, they don't exactly tell you what the plain text is, but they'll tell you, hey, you got it right, or hey, you got it wrong. Okay? Let's say somebody gives you that indication. Yep, your guess was right. Nope, your guess was wrong. Okay? Is there anything you can do here with what you already know about XORing and about the IV? Is there any way that you can start making a educated guess about this whole thing? You can modify anything that you have available to. So you can modify ciphertext, but that's about all you can do. Any ideas? Okay, so I'm going to give, yeah, Terry, go ahead. Okay, so you're looking for patterns. You're looking for patterns. Okay, and in fact, that's usually that's what people do, right? They look for patterns in the ciphertext. So we'll talk about some of the various types of attacks. Okay, now for this one, if you could kind of take a look at this, right? Let's say that you can actually change the ciphertext. Okay, and you try to guess. Right, so remember here, okay, so let me actually kind of use a whiteboard on this. And this is pretty interesting, right? This is the kind of stuff that people who break encryption think about. It's like, wow, okay. So you know that for CBC, to break it, you have the ciphertext. Okay, and I don't care about the first block because I'm not going to be able to figure out what the ID is. It's too hard. Okay, then you have the ciphertext on the second block. Okay, and it goes into the block cipher. Okay, with a key. same thing here, but I don't really care about what happens to the, I actually don't care really about what happens to the first block, okay? And then when the ciphertext goes into the cipher, you're going to have some intermediate value. Right? And then you take this thing with the intermediate value and you're going to XOR it. And then you're getting a plain text out of it. Okay? So the question is, can you use this scheme somehow? You have access to this thing, obviously you have access to this thing, and you can stick things into the cipher, and somebody's going to tell you if you got it right or if you got it wrong. Okay? So let's take, for example, I'm going to take a real simple example, okay? And this is not realistic at all, right? So let's say the intermediate value is 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or something. You know, ones and zeros. So 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1. Let's say that's the intermediate value. Okay? What if you're able to modify the IV, so you say, I'm going to guess the intermediate value to be 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1. Okay? So what would happen if I were to put that and XOR it? What answer would I get on the other side, on the plain text? If I guess it right. What happens if I XOR something that is the same? All zeros, exactly. And if I miss by 1, I won't get all zeros. I'll get 1 somewhere, right? So if somebody can actually tell you, hey, Terumi, you got all zeros, or hey, Terumi, you didn't get all zeros, that kind of tells me then, doesn't it, if I guess this thing right or not? Wouldn't it? Exactly. And then if I said, okay, so this is the right value for the intermediate value, now I'm going to take the original ciphertext that was here that I changed, and I can just go ahead and XOR it, can I not? And then I get a plain text out of it. Right? I'll get a plain text. Okay? So do you see how that works? And I keep on going with this. You still do have to guess. But if somebody, so here's the key, right? Well, how would anybody tell you? Well, that's the problem. Okay? They're in the CBC mode, and the way it was implemented in certain system, you could. The hacker would know whether they were guessing it right or wrong. Not exactly like this. There's a little bit more catch. It's called a padding oracle attack. But I do have that for you. In fact, if you, so just keep this in mind, right? This is why XORing is so important, and this is why CBC is so weak. Okay, and they try to put patch on the CBC so that the error messages, or this confirmation that you got it right or wrong, doesn't go back to the hacker. But there's still issues. And if we were to kind of take a look at this, I think it's just fascinating. How people go about finding these things on a daily basis. So on the slide that I gave you, this one, I've already gave you these. There's something called other goodies. Okay, other goodies. And, oh, what happened? Oh no, what happened to my other goodies? What? I'm not sure what happened there. What happened to the other goodies? Oh, so now it goes. There's some kind of network error down there. Okay, so then I have other goodies, and you have this. So if you go over to the right, and there'll be something called extra slides, and if you go down one, there's something called the CVE 2016-2107. Okay, and this is called the padding oracle attack on OpenSSL. So it came out, like I think in May sometime. Okay, but it's so interesting because this was there was a very hard padding oracle attack on the OpenSSL. I think it was version 1. Let me see. Let's go and take a look at it. So here it is. It came out in May, okay, this year. And if you read this thing, it says the AES-NI implementation in OpenSSL before 1.0.1 does not consider memory allocation during a certain padding check, which allows remote attacker to obtain sensitive clear text information via a padding oracle attack. So what's interesting here is not that part. I mean, that part is interesting, but what comes after in the notes. This vulnerability exists because of an incorrect fix for CVE 2013-0169. Okay, what does that mean? Well, what they're saying is that there was something wrong with OpenSSL back in 2013. They fixed it, but the fix actually introduced another vulnerability, and it's stuck there until like this year. So it's stuck there for like 3 years. So the actual bug fix, the patch, introduced another vulnerability, and the funny thing about it is that the original vulnerability that they fixed, 2013-0169, is called Lucky 13 attack, and that was much harder to actually exploit than the current padding oracle OpenSSL attack. You know, so here I have it all for you. I have the Lucky 13 attack, I have the padding oracle attack, and probably all the other information you probably need to be able to kind of decipher what's happening here. We won't be doing that in class, but if you would like a challenge, take a look at how they did it, and I have all the supporting information. By the way, this padding oracle on OpenSSL, this blog is written by a guy who found this particular vulnerability. Okay, and basically padding oracle is the one that's kind of telling you yay or nay. Okay, so there you go. That's that one for you. Okay, so I'm just going to let's see, it's right here. Okay, so very good. So that was cipher blockchaining, and we've only got through 2. But we're going to go pretty fast on the next ones. So the next one that you need to know, you actually don't need to know PCBC, so we'll skip through this thing. Getting cipher blockchaining, but it's not in one of the things you need to know, but one thing you have to know is cipher feedback. Okay, cipher feedback. Let's take a look at how that works. Okay, so here we go. This is cipher feedback. And notice that this looks way different, right, from what we've seen before in the ECB and CBC. So you have the IV going into the block cipher. Oh, interesting. IV going in. And then you XOR it with a plain text, and then you get a ciphertext. Okay? And you take that ciphertext, here we go, one more time. You take that ciphertext, and then that's what becomes the IV. All right, so you see what's happening here, right? And then you XOR with the plain text, ciphertext keeps on going in that direction. So let's take a look at how you do on the decryption side. Okay, so what you have is you have all the ciphertexts. That's what you have. Okay, so you take the IV and you stick in the XOR, and then you take that ciphertext, put it into the block cipher again. So once again, you have a similar issue, don't you? Okay, this one even looks easier. Let me see. Ciphertext, sticks it in, and you have the ciphertext, and you get the plain text. Yeah, so before you were XORing it, not with the ciphertext, with the IV. This one. So see, the ciphertext is being XOR'd, and then it came with the plain text. So in this case, you're putting ciphertext in, and then you're also XORing with the cipher. Let me see. You're putting the ciphertext in, and then you're. Let me see. I'm sorry. I'm on the wrong one. Here it is. You take the ciphertext in, and then you're actually you have all the ciphertext, so you still have all the thing that you need. You basically do, okay, with the plain text. Okay, it's just that the IV is just going in a different place to start out. Okay, So before it was the ciphertext that went in, and the IV was the first XORed, but it's not anymore. So there are ways to break. Well, I'm sure there's a way to break that too. Okay, so let me just get rid of that. Okay, so that's cipher feedback number 3. I'm sorry, my mouse is going crazy. Hang on. And the next one is output feedback, OFB. Output feedback, same thing with the IV, but what's the difference? Well, the initialization vector to the next one is not the ciphertext. So this one's a little harder, isn't it? It's not the ciphertext, but it's the intermediate product of the decrypted IV. And then you XOR with the plain text, and then you get the ciphertext. And that keeps on going forward. Okay? Output feedback mode. So how you would break it would be this. IV goes into the block cipher, you have the ciphertext XORing it, and you have these ciphertexts. Right? So what that means is you can manipulate them. Right? You can manipulate them. Sorry, my mouse is kind of moving weird. Okay? So once you know how CBC was broken, you can probably start to see, hey, I think I could do something about this. Right? Because you have certain parts of this that you can manipulate. Okay? And last but not least, you have something called the counter mode. The counter mode. So the counter mode is, instead of the IV going in, you have the combination of what's called the nonce and the counter. Nonce and the counter. Nonce is fixed. It doesn't change. But the counter changes. Okay? So the IV changes every time, and then the plain text XOR it, and you get the ciphertext. Okay? So here it is. This is the way to decrypt it. The nonce goes in, ciphertext once again, right? You have these things. But in this case, you don't have the nonce. Right? You don't have access to the nonce because the IV is not visible to you. But you do have the ciphertext. So this is going to be a little harder, wouldn't it? So there you go. That would be the counter mode. Counter mode. As I mentioned, you're not responsible for knowing how these things work. You're not. You just need to know what the 5 modes are, and at least be able to tell which one is the easiest one to break. As far as the book is concerned, ECB, electronic code book, is the easiest one to break. Okay? Any questions on that? All right. Hang on. Here. All right, so let's go back to the presentation. Okay, so now you have the 5 ECB, CBC, right? CFP, OFP, and the counter mode. Those are the 5 that you need to know. Right? And here we go. Now, types of symmetric encryption. We have DES, right? Data encryption standard. They're actually talking about, DES is not the algorithm, it's a standard. But the algorithm is DEA. But, people talk about DES anyway, so, it's okay to talk about DES. So, DES, continue. There's something called a single DES. This is the original implementation. Of course, they didn't call it single DES, then they just called it DES, right? The blocks are 64-bit blocks, okay? And the keys are 56-bit keys. It's pretty short for modern encryption standard. And 16 rounds of encryption. So what that means is this. If we would, when say 16 rounds, okay, we'll take the simplest one. We'll take the ECB. Because DES could be in any of 5 modes. So here's ECB, okay? And what they're saying is that 16 rounds means you put the plain text in, pop out the ciphertext, you take that and you put it into the ciphertext again, and you get the ciphertext of the ciphertext, and then you put that in again, you get the ciphertext of the ciphertext of the ciphertext. So you do that 16 times. This is called rounds. And you do 16 times on each of the blocks. That's what a round is, okay? Alrighty. So that's what it is, DES, okay? And triple DES, okay, triple DES. So what they found out was DES was very, very strong, and the government was using it until Somebody figured out that, hey, it's been around for a while, and now we know how to break it. And of course, there's the conspiracy thing about, NSA becoming part of creating DES, and they put some kind of weakness into it, okay, like a backdoor. So they said, well, okay, we probably have to make that a little stronger because people are breaking it right and left. So triple DES is you do single DES 3 times. Yeah, 3 times per block. So every block you do this. So this picture shows you the encryption on the top and the decryption on the bottom. Okay. So you have the plain text. Let's look at the encryption part. You have the plain text. You do the DES thing that you just saw. 16 rounds, 56 blocks, all that. Okay. And then you take the output from that, and you take another key, key 2, not the same key, but key 2, and you do single DES one more time. You take an output of that, and you take the third key, and then you do the DES. So you got 3 keys, right? 3 repetitions of the single DES. Okay, this is called the triple DES. Okay, even this is not strong enough. Okay, obviously there's some major problems with DES. Okay, algorithm DES. Okay. Any questions on triple DES? Because we're going to go into how do you break triple DES a little bit later on. Okie dokie. So let's go to the next one. IDEA. Okay. International Data Encryption Algorithm. IDEA. 64-bit blocks, a little bit longer. 128-bit keys. Wow, way longer. Okay. AES. This is what we're using right now in the government. Right. You have options. It's 128-bit blocks. Okay. And you could do keys in various length with different rounds. Okay, I believe the government is using the stringent one, the most stringent one, which is 256-bit keys with 14 rounds of encryption. Alrighty. Blowfish and twofish. Blowfish, 64-bit blocks. Just remember, it is a symmetric encryption. 32 through 48-bit keys. Twofish, 128-bit blocks. And keys are of that length. It is a finalist in the AES contest. That is, when triple DES was found to be no good, the U.S. government held a contest. Said, look, we're not going to be creating this thing in-house. We want somebody very, very smart to come up with something very, very strong. So the actual winner of the contest was Rijendale algorithm, and Rijendale algorithm became the AES. But there were other people that came up with it. And twofish is one of those. And twofish is notable because of the guy who wrote the whole thing. It's called Chenier. So Bruce Chenier. Bruce Chenier on security. Here we go. So it's this guy. He's pretty well known in the industry. So this guy here. So he's especially very strong in encryption, and he came up with Blowfish. Although he didn't win, I mean, obviously he's an expert in the field, and he just came out with a book called the Data in Goliath. He talks about the surveillance that's happening in the United States. Mainly, he talks about the NSA. He's one of those people that think NSA really should be controlled more. So there's a book for you. It was a pretty interesting read. Okay, so if you want to keep up with stuff like that, he would be one person to keep up with. And there's another one, Krebs. Krebs on security. It's just of course it's not on the exam, but to keep you kind of updated on what's going on. He came out with a book end of last year called the Spam Nation. I'm not sure if you've seen that. Oh, yeah, here it is. Oh, look at that, LinkedIn. But anyway, so this is Krebs on security, and Spam Nation is a very good book. It talks about the criminal elements in the cyber world, mainly the Russians in this case. He did some investigative reporting on it. So there you go, just on the side. Any questions on these? Okay, all right, so let's move on. RC5 and RC6, actually there's RC4, but RC4 is a stream cipher. RC5 and RC6 are block ciphers. So here it is. You have these blocks 0 through 2040 bit keys. RC6, 128-bit block. There it is. Okay. So these are the ones, are these symmetric ciphers. Okay. Asymmetric encryption. Let's take a look at this one. Going through, uses mathematically derived key pairs, right? It's the different key, right? You encrypt with one, you decrypt with the other, and vice versa, right? And the reason why this came up is because we wanted to share the secret key, right? Basically, that's what we wanted to do. The keys are derived using something called a one-way function, where going one direction is very easy to do, but going back the other way is much harder to do. Not impossible to do, but much harder to do, okay? And uses one key to encrypt and the other key to decrypt, right? That's basically what asymmetric encryption is all about. And this one-way function, a guy named Rivest of the RSA fame came up with, this idea that says, hey, look, factoring prime numbers could be something that we can use to do it easy on one side but difficult on the other. And here's the example. And this example is straight from the book, okay? So it says multiplying prime numbers, let's say 6,269 by prime number 7,883 will give you 49,418,527. Okay, should be easy to do. If they give you those two numbers, you just need a calculator, right? But figuring out the opposite is much harder. So if they give you that product, 49,418,527, and said, hey, come up with two prime numbers. When you multiply them by each other, you get this output. Okay. So what do you think? Do you think it's really hard to do? Anybody familiar with prime numbers? Huh. Okay. Well, in my last class, which was last week, I had a customer who was into prime numbers. Okay. And she raised her hand and said, look, this is easy to do. We could figure this thing out. So she went to kind of explain to the group, how you figure out the two prime numbers. It's, if you use a calculator, it's easy to do. Chris. Cyclic numbers? You mean how they're used to come up with the keys? Right, exactly, Chris. So she was explaining about the modulus. That's right. So, take mod or some numbers and stuff. And it was all Greek to me. But, she said, oh, come on, tell me it's easy. But here's the thing that she came up with. She said, this can't be right because doing the prime number thing is not that hard. So she came up with the, equation for how do you come up with the prime numbers and stuff. And then she looked at the number. She said, 49,418,527. And she said, this is not a pure prime number. She said that this is, it's not using pure prime numbers. That she called it like a, she didn't say quasi-prime numbers, but she said something like subprime numbers or something like that. And she said that's harder to do. And I said, that's good enough for me. I think that's too much information for me. But so you actually proved the case that it is hard to do. And I guess it's harder than the prime number, Christopher. So I don't know. It is about the modulus, though. Yeah. It'll be interesting, but you don't need to know that much for the exam. But I just think it's fascinating. Every time I teach this thing, I have so many different people with so much different experience that they know something more in depth on these things. And, that's the point, isn't it, of CISSP, is that, what they recommend is that before you take the exam, that you have deep knowledge in couple of 2 or 3 modules, 2 or 3 domains. That's what they recommend. And so I get all kinds of people in my class. which makes it interesting. I could just say, oh, I'm a generalist. You could, okay, but I'm interested. Yeah, so there you go. So here's another example. Now this one's called discrete logarithms, and you know, mathematics just was not one of my favorite things, especially when you came to calculus and all this stuff. But computing 7 to the 13th power, there it is, there's that big number, right? But figuring out the reverse, the log, is much harder. Okay, so there you go. That would be another example. Okay, and here's the Diffie-Hellman key agreement protocol. Diffie-Hellman. So I sort of mentioned initially when I was talking about the asymmetric encryption that, look, there's when you do the asymmetric encryption, you know, using these public key and private key stuff, the secret key is still going across the network. You're just encrypting it. You're just encrypting it with the public key, but the thing, if somebody were to grab hold of that thing that's encrypted, and if they could somehow decrypt, right, then the key is in there. The key is in there. But Diffie-Hellman, right, Professor Diffie and Professor Hellman came up with a way where you don't have to send the key over, okay, and still have shared secret. Okay, so this is called the Diffie-Hellman key agreement protocol. So let's take a look at how this is done. And you see the color, you see the Alice and Bob. This is, I believe this is actually what Diffie-Hellman used to explain their algorithm. So let's just go ahead and if it's good enough for Diffie-Hellman, it's good enough for us. It was actually good enough for me anyway. And they also found some weakness in Diffie-Hellman too. I mean, you know, which one isn't really immune from people finding something wrong with it. So I think I like this one. Oh, look, there's a mod P thing. There it is, Christopher. But I'm not going to choose that one. I'm going to choose the colors. All right, here we go. Okay, so to make the long story short, you look all the way to the bottom, see the drab green, that's the common secret. Okay, that's the common secret. And they explain it in terms of colors, but of course it's not colors, right? But here it is. That's the common secret. So but you see that drab green is not exchanged anywhere. It's not exchanged anywhere. Okay? So how does Alice and Bob agree to this common secret? So let's take a look at it. They explain that Alice and Bob still has to agree upon one thing, which is a common color, which is yellow. And then Alice and Bob individually comes up with the secret colors that they don't have to share with each other. And the common color and the secret colors are mixed both in Alice and Bob. And Alice sends that orange thing, which is the mixture of yellow and bright orange, to Bob, and Bob does the same, you know, mixture of yellow with the turquoise, and comes out with the baby blue. There is one major assumption here. As they do the public transportation and send these colors over, if someone were to be looking at it and say, whoa, orange is going past, whoa, you know, the baby blue is going past, and they say, I know the orange is a combination of yellow and bright orange. Now, they're saying that's not easy to do. And that's the assumption. Okay? And they look at the baby blue and say, oh, that is definitely a combination of yellow and turquoise. Okay? There are many ways to get blue, many ways to get orange. So given that, the assumption is a mixture. Separation is expensive. Okay? But because you have both colors, like you have the blue and the orange, I'm sure you can't possibly come out and say, okay, so what's similar? Okay? And if they could figure out the yellow, then they could figure out all the rest. So we're saying that it's expensive, not impossible. Okay. Then once Alice receives Bob's mixture and Bob receives Alice's mixture, they once again mix this with their secret colors. And they both get the common secret, which is the drab green. Okay. So tell me, why did this happen? What is the mechanism for this, same color to be shared between Alice and Bob? I know you guys are looking at it very, very deeply. Anybody? Chris? Adding paint is transitive. What does that mean, Chris? I don't think I understand. I'm searching my brain for everything that I know about transitive, and I'm not sure I'm getting it. Meaning the order you add them doesn't matter. A plus B equals C and B plus A. That's right, exactly. So, yeah, that's right. So, very good. Now I got it. You're talking about the order, right? So, so you're right, right? So if you look at the drab green, you say, how do you get drab green? Well, from the Alice's perspective, you add the bright orange and then the baby blue, but the baby blue is the green and yellow, right? So you get drab green by mixing yellow, green, and orange. Looking from the Bob's perspective, Bob got that drab green by adding green and orange, but the orange is made up of yellow and bright orange. So in the end, they both add same numbers, same colors, but in different order, exactly. Right. I got to tell you, I couldn't figure this one out. I had to have one of my students, explain it to me. But now I know, right? Okay, so there you go. That is how they do it. And the elegance of it, isn't it? I mean, isn't it kind of simple, and yet it's so powerful, right, to do that. But of course, common paint has to remain, the secret colors has to remain secret, right? Or else people are going to figure out. Okay, and like I said, the assumption has to be true. So, but if we look at this thing, and I'm not even going to go there because I don't even know how to explain this thing, but I think maybe eventually this might be fun to do. So you got the Alice and Bob doing these things, you got all the mods and stuff, so there you go. I don't know how these things work, but I think maybe Christopher might. Right? So there you go. So that will be the Diffie-Hellman. Okay, so I think this might be a good place to take a 10-minute break. Yeah, I think that might be. Hang on. I think that might be the good place to stop right now. So let's take a 10-minute break, okay? And when we come back, we'll finish this thing. Okay, we'll finish this thing off. All right, see you back in minutes. Thank you.